I can never quite recall the exact moment, the place, or even the circumstances under which I first met Eleonora. It was a lifetime ago, it seems, and my memory has faded with time. However, I believe our paths first crossed in a grand, ancient city nestled along the Rhine River in Germany. She spoke of descending from a noble, time-honored family, yet the surname of the woman who became my confidante, my partner in intellectual pursuits, and ultimately my wife, remained a mystery to me. Why did I never learn her family name? Perhaps it was her own wish to keep it shielded from me, a secret held close. The truth is, I cannot remember. But one thing remains etched in my mind with perfect clarity: Eleonora's presence. She was tall, with a slender grace that, in her final days, became a haunting thinness. How can I even begin to describe the silent, aristocratic elegance of her movements, or the ethereal softness of her footfalls? Often, her arrival in my study was announced not by a sound, but by the gentle melody of her voice or the light touch of her pale hand upon my shoulder. Her face was a masterpiece of unconventional beauty. It wasn't the classic, symmetrical beauty one sees in statues, but something far more captivating and strange. I've spent countless hours trying to decipher its allure. Was it the immaculate porcelain of her skin, or the voluminous cascade of her jet-black hair? I would study the delicate, perfect line of her nose and the soft, crimson curve of her mouth. When she smiled, her teeth were like pearls. But it was her eyes that held the true enigma. They were unusually large, and in moments of passion, they would glow with the intensity of a wild deer's. They were pools of black, framed by long, dark lashes and perfectly arched brows. Yet, within their depths, I always detected a peculiar expression, a hidden language I could never quite translate. I would ponder it for hours, often through the sleepless nights, feeling as though I was on the verge of understanding, only for the answer to slip away like a phantom. Eleonora possessed a formidable intellect and an unyielding will. She was a master of Latin and Greek and conversed flawlessly in several other languages, never once making an error. Her mind was as sharp as a razor, equally at home in the world of science and mathematics as it was in ancient texts. In the early days of our marriage, I frequently sought her assistance in my own studies, and we would work side by side, our minds intertwined. After her passing, I was utterly lost, a child fumbling in the darkness without her guiding light. When the illness first took hold, her visits to my study grew less frequent. She lost weight, and her skin took on a pale, translucent quality. The realization that she was dying plunged me into a state of utter desperation. Eleonora fought against her fate with every ounce of her being, her determination to live burning fiercely. I watched in agony as she battled the encroaching shadows. I had always known she loved me, but it was only in the face of her mortality that I grasped the true depth of her devotion. She would cling to my hands, her voice a whisper, telling me how completely she was mine. It is too painful to recount in detail, but her profound love for me was inextricably linked to her will to survive. On the night she passed, she jolted upright in bed, her voice a cry of anguish. "Oh, God, must I die? Must I truly lose this fight with death? No, I cannot die this way." But my beloved Eleonora did die. The grief was a crushing weight, and I could no longer bear to remain in that old city by the Rhine. For several months, I wandered aimlessly, a ghost haunting the ruins of my own life. Eventually, I purchased an old, secluded abbey in a remote corner of England. The dark, melancholic atmosphere of the place mirrored the desolation in my soul. Yet, in a strange paradox, I filled its halls with vibrant, richly colored curtains, carpets, and lavish ornaments. I told myself that perhaps the brilliant hues would chase away the shadows in my heart. They did not. I sought solace in drink, a period of my life I'd rather not dwell upon. I will only say that, one day, I took a new wife, Lady Annabel of Whitefield. My new bride, with her golden hair and eyes the color of a summer sky, was the very antithesis of my first wife. But how could a new love ever erase the memory of Eleonora? I brought Lady Annabel to a chamber high in the abbey's tower, where we were to spend the first month of our marriage. The room was immense, dominated by a colossal window of Venetian glass. The ceiling soared like that of a cathedral, a great golden chandelier hanging from its center. Silken sofas from the Orient and an ornate Indian bed furnished the space. The walls were adorned with massive tapestries, their intricate designs woven with threads of gold, which seemed to ripple and shift with every gust of wind. My wife was wary of me, frightened by the deep-seated sadness and depression that clung to me like a shroud. Her love for me was lukewarm at best, and she often kept her distance, a fact which I confess I preferred. My thoughts were always with Eleonora, my beautiful Eleonora, lying cold in her tomb. Sometimes, in the throes of a dream, I would call out her name into the night, foolishly imagining that the sheer force of my love could somehow summon her back to me. As the second month of our marriage began, Lady Annabel fell ill. She slept poorly, complaining of strange sounds and subtle movements within the tower room. "It's just a fever," I insisted. "You're imagining things." She recovered for a time, but soon relapsed, succumbing to a second, more severe illness that baffled her physicians. Once again, she began to hear the faint sounds and perceive the ghostly movements in the bedchamber, which terrified her. One night, near the end of September, she awoke with a start. I was seated on a sofa near her bed. She whispered to me, her thin face a mask of fear, that she could hear and see things. I, however, saw and heard nothing. "It is only the wind," I explained. "You can see the tapestries moving." But her face was ashen with terror, and she was on the brink of fainting. I remembered a bottle of wine on a table across the room. As I walked into the light of the chandelier, a most peculiar sensation overcame me. I felt an unseen presence pass by me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a faint shadow, the mere ghost of a shadow on the carpet where none should be. I chose to say nothing of it to Annabel. I poured a glass of wine and brought it to her, then returned to my seat on the sofa to watch her. After a few moments, I heard it, the softest of footsteps on the carpet, approaching the bed. A second later, just as Annabel raised the glass to her lips, I saw, or perhaps I dreamed I saw, 3 or 4 large, ruby-red drops of a luminous liquid fall from the air and dissolve into the wine. Annabel, oblivious, drank it down. I remained silent, convincing myself it was a figment of my overactive imagination. Following this incident, Annabel's health deteriorated rapidly. On the 3rd night, she died. Her servants prepared her body for its final resting place, covering her with a white sheet. The following night, I sat alone with her corpse in our bridal chamber. The room seemed alive with shifting shapes and shadows. I cast nervous glances into the dark corners and at the undulating tapestries, a profound sense of dread creeping over me. Then my eyes fell upon the carpet beneath the chandelier. The strange shadow was gone, and I felt a small measure of relief. As I gazed upon Annabel's still form on the bed, poignant memories of Eleonora, the only woman I had ever truly loved, washed over me. It must have been around midnight when a sound, quiet but distinct, pulled me from my reverie. It seemed to emanate from the bed. I listened, my body frozen in terror, but the sound did not repeat. I scrutinized Annabel's body for any sign of life, but she remained perfectly still. Minutes ticked by. Then, I noticed a faint flush of color returning to her cheeks. My heart seized in my chest. I was paralyzed with horror. When I finally accepted the impossible truth that Annabel was not dead, I rushed to revive her. But just as quickly, the color drained from her face, her features hardening once more into a marble-like stillness, her lips drawn thin in the grotesque expression of death. Her body grew cold and rigid again. Defeated, I collapsed onto the sofa and fell into a fitful dream of Eleonora. An hour later, the same sound echoed through the room. I listened intently. Yes, there it was again, a soft sigh from the bed. I rushed to her side and saw, unmistakably, that her lips were trembling. Then they parted, revealing her pearly teeth. I felt I was losing my mind. A rosy hue spread across her cheeks and neck. Her body grew warm to the touch, and I could feel the faint, fluttery beat of her heart. Lady Annabel was alive. I threw myself into the task of reviving her. But as before, the life force receded. Her color vanished, her heart ceased its struggle, and her body became a cold, stiff effigy once more. I sank back onto the sofa, my thoughts inevitably returning to Eleonora. And then, for a third time, a sound came from the bed. Why must I recount the full horror of that dreadful night? Again I tried to revive Annabel, and for a fourth time, life flickered within her. Each time, it was as if she were wrestling with some invisible entity, and with each resurgence, her appearance seemed to subtly change in ways I could not define. Dawn was breaking when she stirred for the last time. I was slumped on the sofa, utterly spent, but this time, Annabel's body moved with a newfound energy. The color flooded back into her face, and her features softened with the signs of life. Her eyes remained closed, but she looked alive. Then, to my astonishment, she rose from the bed and, like a sleepwalker, moved slowly and deliberately to the center of the room. I did not tremble, I did not move. I was as cold and still as a statue, paralyzed by the spectacle before me. My mind raced with frantic, impossible thoughts. Was this truly Annabel, alive and breathing? Could I really see her golden hair and blue eyes? Why was I so uncertain? Her mouth was obscured by shadows, but her cheeks glowed like pink roses. Were they not Annabel's cheeks? But wasn't she taller than before? A wave of madness crashed over me. I lunged towards her, but she glided away. It was then that I saw her long tresses, stirred by an unfelt wind. Her hair was not blonde, it was blacker than a starless midnight. And then, slowly, her eyelids lifted. I screamed, a raw, unholy sound torn from the depths of my soul, for the eyes that stared back at me were not the sky-blue eyes of Lady Annabel. They were the deep, black, fathomless eyes of my lost love. The eyes of Eleonora.